Hey, 7th graders, your assignment today is called the Orange-Bellied Parrot Food Web Activity. So obviously from this, you guys are going to be exploring food webs and how to create them. But mainly the thing that we're looking at when we do a food web is how energy is transferred in an ecosystem. What you maybe have learned about already this week or will be learning about later this week is why energy is so important to the survival of a population, especially when it comes to reproduction. Okay, so your learning targets for today are I can build a food web and I can identify consumer and resource populations in an ecosystem. So this is a vocab word that you guys maybe got earlier this week if you've done 2.1 and 2.2 populations, or you guys will get this later in the week when you come to class and do this, okay? But we will go over it so you guys obviously know what a consumer and a resource population is. Okay, let's move on. What is a food web? A food web is a picture that shows us where different organisms in an ecosystem get their energy. They might get it from multiple places, or in the case of things like plants, they can make it themselves. Okay, so it shows us consumer and resource populations. So this is that vocab piece that I'm talking about that you guys kind of need to know to be able to frame where things go in your food web. So a consumer population is a population that has to eat other organisms to get their energy. So let's take, for instance, a wolf. Okay, a wolf is definitely a consumer population because it eats things like deer, elk, you know, whatever it can get its hands on as far as prey to get its energy. Okay, they are a consumer population only. Okay. On the other hand, a resource population is a population that is eaten for energy. So let's take a look at something like a plant, like a grass. Okay, that is a resource population because other animals like deer come along and eat it for energy. Okay, there are a lot of animals that are both consumer populations and resource populations. So let's take a look at deer, for instance. A deer obviously is a resource population because it gets eaten. Okay, something like an elk, or excuse me, a wolf or a bear eat deer all the time. Okay, they are also consumer populations because they still do have to eat other organisms to get their energy, and those other organisms are in the form of plants. Okay, so you can have some organisms that are both consumer and resource populations, some that are only consumer populations, and some that are only resource populations. They're only ever eaten. A food web also shows us the transfer of energy storage molecules. And again, if you guys have done 2.1 or 2.2, you guys will understand why energy storage molecules are so important outside of the obvious. Okay, so what is a food web? It might look simple like this, where we have corn giving its energy to a mouse, and the mouse is getting eaten by the owl, so it's giving its energy to the owl. Notice the direction of the arrows. Okay, so the arrows point in the direction that show the transfer of energy. So the corn gives its energy to the mouse. So the arrow points from the corn to the mouse. And the mouse gives its energy to the owl when it is eaten. So again, the arrow points from the mouse to the owl. You guys might also see a food web look really complicated like this. Notice how we've got all kinds of consumer-only populations up here that get their energy from multiple different resource populations. And then those resource populations of these predators up here also consumer population because they get their energy from different grasses, bugs, those kinds of things. So this is a very complicated food web, but again, note the direction of the arrows. Okay, the arrows point to the animal that's doing the eating, okay, because they're getting energy from whatever they are eating. So this wildebeest is giving its energy to the hyena when the hyena kills and eats it. Okay, all right, so your activity today is creating a food web using organisms found in Tasmania. But first, let's learn something about Tasmania. This is a little picture of Tasmania. It's an island off the southeast corner of Australia in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Tasmania is cooler compared to Australia, and it has 4 seasons. Tasmania is a temperate rainforest. So it gets a lot of rain because it's an island. It's kind of out in the middle of the ocean there, but it's temperate. It's not like a kind of rainforest that you would see in like Costa Rica where it's closer to the equator and really warm, okay? So they're temperate. They have more like 4 seasons rather than hot and hotter, okay? All right, here's a map. Here's Australia. Here is Tasmania down here, and so it's kind of off the southeastern part of Australia. And yes, There's such thing as a Tasmanian devil, and this is where that Tasmanian devil calls home. All right, so let's meet some of the locals. These are the organisms that you guys are going to be using to create this food web of Tasmania. And I'm going to talk about what we mean here when we see things like resource populations and consumer populations. So this is your first organism. This is button grass. Okay, button grass is a type of grass that provides habitat and food for many organisms. So resource populations, that means what does this grass eat? Okay, because it is a plant, it doesn't need to eat anything. It makes its own food. So there are no resource populations for button grass. However, consumer populations are going to be the thing that eats the button grass. So what does the button grass get eaten by? Orange-bellied parrots and sparrows. Okay? All right, the collared sparrow hawk is small birds of prey that live on the the island and the surrounding areas. Their resource populations, remember this is what they eat to get their food, are sparrows, hence the name collared sparrowhawks. They like to attack sparrows. And the consumer populations, those are the things that eat the collared sparrowhawks because they are a top tier predator. They have none on the island, so nothing is going after this collared sparrowhawk to eat it. Okay, long-nosed potoroo. The long-nosed potoroos are small marsupial animals. If you guys know what a marsupial is, or if you don't, they're little animals that give birth to their baby almost kind of prematurely and then carry them in a little pocket until they're old enough to survive on their own. So they have their resource population. Again, this is what they eat, is the Pixies parasol mushrooms, which you guys are going to learn about. And then the consumer populations for this potoroo are red foxes and Tasmanian devils. So those are the two organisms that hunt and eat this little marsupial. Orange-bellied parrot, this is the namesake of this assignment. Notice the little patch of orange on its belly. Obviously, that's where it gets its name. They're migratory birds that reproduce on the island. So when it's time for them to find a mate and lay their eggs, they come back to Tasmania to do that. Other times of the year, they are elsewhere. Okay, resource populations, button grass, so that's what they eat. And consumer populations, they are eaten by feral cats and red foxes. So feral means wild. We're going to learn about those here in a second. Okay, red foxes were brought to the island by humans in the 1800s and have been there ever since. So they weren't native to Tasmania, but now you can find a fairly good population of red foxes there. They eat orange-bellied parrots and long-nosed potoroos, and their consumer population, as they are a top-tier predator as well, they have none on the island that are hunting and eating them. Tasmanian devil, the man, the myth, the legend. Tasmanian devils are mammals with an aggressive reputation. If you guys have ever watched Looney Tunes, know that they're quite aggressive. Their resource population, the thing they like to hunt and eat, are these long-nosed potoroos. And because, again, that they are a top-tier predator, they have no consumer populations on the island. Pixies parasol mushrooms, that's what these little parasol mushrooms look like. A parasol is a type of umbrella, so it kind of looks like this little umbrella. Pixies parasol mushrooms are fungi that live on the base of trees. They can make their own food or just absorb from the ground rather, so they don't really need to kill and eat anything. They just absorb their nutrients from the ground around the base of the trees. And consumer populations, the long-nosed potoroos love to make these little mushrooms their snacks. Okay, feral cats. Feral cats are small wild cats. These cats were brought to the island by humans in the 1800s. Again, same with the red foxes. They weren't native to Tasmania, but now there's quite a large population of them. And they look kind of like house cats, except they're very much wild and even a little bit bigger. Their resource population, their main thing they like to eat is orange-bellied parrots, which is rough for the parrots, especially when they're trying to reproduce. And consumer populations, there are none that we know of on the island. Sparrows are small birds. You guys have all seen these sparrows. We have them all around Montana, so it's no different. Their resource population is button grass. That's what they like to eat, and they are hunted by collared sparrowhawks. Okay, so here's your assignment. On the next slide, you guys are going to build a food web of Tasmania showing the organisms we just read about. Use the arrows to show all the ways in which energy is transferred in the food web. Review which way the arrow points if need be. So remember, your guys' arrow is going to point to where the energy is transferred. So you guys might start off with something like this, where you guys have your button grass. This is a little picture that you guys saw from your button grass. I would generally put your guys' resource-only populations on the left-hand side, and then put your consumer-only populations on the left-hand side. So maybe like the feral cat you would put over here on the left-hand side. Okay, so this is my button grass. We could look at some of the things that eat button grass. So for instance, the orange-bellied parrot and I believe the sparrow both ate the button grass. Okay, so you guys could drag those over. This middle column will be your guys' resource and your consumer population as well. And then you guys can grab your draw tool and you guys are going to draw an arrow. So remember, the orange-bellied parrot eats the button grass, so that's where it gets its energy from. So our energy is going from the button grass to the orange-bellied parrot. It is also eaten by the sparrow. So you guys would need to draw 2 arrows for that one to say, all right, the button grass is also eaten by this sparrow. That's what it looks like. And then you guys are going to go on, fill in the rest of these populations here and here. These are your consumer and resource. This is your resource only. And these 3 are the rest of your consumer only population. So make sure you guys connect, because it's not always where one animal only eats one thing. They might eat multiple things or get eaten by multiple things. So make sure you guys double check that you have all the arrows. Obviously, if you can't remember who eats what, go back and review the little individual slides that talk about each of these organisms, okay? When you guys are done filling out and you have all your arrows included, you are done with this assignment, you guys can go ahead and hand it in, and I hope you are having a wonderful day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.